There's a bit of a scandal brewing south of the border. There are recent reports that the U.S. Justice Department has discovered 6 new classified documents at U.S. President Joe Biden's Delaware home during a recent search by FBI agents. Now, to chat about this in more detail is American political correspondent Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, explain why this find by the FBI is so significant.
Well, this is the 5th find by the FBI with documents that are extremely sensitive in nature. That's why they were classified documents, just placed carelessly in boxes, just like all the other trash we all have in his garage and other places in his home and office. It's significant because of a couple of things. Obviously, the sensitive nature of these documents. Why is he in possession of these documents? And the timing of this release. We know that the first batch of documents were in fact found before the midterm election here in the United States. It was obviously a very important election. It was kind of predicted to go one way, it went the other way. This information, which was already basically found, was not released to the American public to perhaps skew the election one way or another. Who knows? But the question remains, this is already being politicized. Why the timing of it all now, as Joe Biden perhaps wants to run for re-election, the Democrats are scrambling because of what happened with Trump's documents and the way that was handled at Mar-a-Lago. A lot of questions, but how perhaps the Americans, there's actually a poll that we did for the Foreign Desk, that the Americans, in fact, want partisan leadership from Washington instead of this, nonpartisan leadership rather than this partisan, infighting that doesn't get the Americans anywhere. It doesn't, produce good policy. It doesn't lead us in the proper way. So this is yet another example of that partisan politics. And hopefully we can kind of move away from the partisanship and say, why were these documents that really undermine America as a whole, not just one party, why were these documents so carelessly placed around?
Now, do we know at this point what was actually in some of those classified documents?
Well, I know that with a batch of them definitely pertained to foreign policy with regards to Russia and Iran. Really, those are, when you think about that, why was he even in possession of those documents? And they actually pertain to Obama era politics. So when we actually, metaphorically say that this is the 2.0 presidency of the Obama administration, particularly with regard to foreign policy, there you have it. He actually has the handbook. He has the documents in his possession. But these will all, kind of hopefully surface, and we will have more information about, what these were. This last batch, I heard this morning from a very credible source that they perhaps could have been items like photographs and things like of that nature. So we will have to find out what they are and what their significance are.
Lisa, U.S. Congress is considering a resolution to use military force against the Mexican drug cartels. It stems from an ongoing fentanyl epidemic crossing into the United States.
Right. I mean, it's horrific. The number of deaths that the United States is facing because of fentanyl, and particularly in younger age groups, young people who are just experimenting for the first time, or those who perhaps believe that they're more, experienced recreational drug users that are not understanding the strength of the fentanyl, the amount that's coming in, or the quality of it. Now, remember, a lot of this, the materials used in making it are coming from China, and then they're using it to smuggle through our southern border. So a lot to be called out here in terms of China's involvement, in terms of the drug cartels, in terms of our southern border being so vulnerable, and then talking about the actual consequences of having this fentanyl come into our communities and our suburbs and killing young people. I mean, the numbers are astronomical. There has to be something that is done about it very, very soon.
And sadly, what happens to a lot of the drugs make their way to the United States and then, of course, cross the border into Canada as well. Lisa, not only has the United States been supporting Ukraine in its war with Russia, as has Canada financially, but now apparently the U.S. has secretly upgraded the National Guard's training program for Taiwanese troops as the threats from China allegedly continue.
Yes, this is actually an interesting development this week because we also found out that the U.S. is going to be involved in training about 100 Ukrainian troops, and now add to it that the United States already started with training of Taiwanese troops early last spring. This is in preparation for, or perhaps a warning to, the Chinese if they should invade Taiwan, that the Taiwanese have this some sort of preparation, not just the weaponry, but the know-how to stand up for themselves and to actually engage in defending themselves. So this is the latest. The United States is actively getting involved and obviously sending a strong message to China right now.
A drone strike on a U.S. military post in Syria injured 2 coalition fighters. Now, the U.S. Central Command says 2 of the drones were shot down, but a third hit the compound.
Yes, what's unfortunate about these updates is how they don't connect the dots for us, right? These journalists that are just talking about a strike in Syria, and people just look the other way because we are so just desensitized to this kind of news, especially in that part of the world. But what we're not hearing is who's supporting these attacks on U.S. So this is basically a proxy war, and the Iranian regime is involved. It has its fingerprints on all sorts of proxy groups. It is supporting in the region, supporting terrorism, supporting suicide bombers. And we can go through the region. It's the Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza and the West Bank. We have obviously these insurgencies in Syria propping up the Bashar al-Assad regime as well, the Houthis in Yemen, and the list goes on. So when there is an attack on American assets, Western assets in the region, we got to look at who's responsible for them, and in this case, the Iran regime. And let's just juxtapose this with the fact that the United States and the European allies, up until a few months ago, were at the negotiating table with Iran's regime, trying to get that handshake, trying to get them to sign on to a deal, a nuclear deal. And yet you see the Iran regime's bad behavior continue, whether it's killing the people back at home, peaceful protesters on the streets, hanging these young protesters merely for coming out and having peaceful protests. And there you have it, with the support of terrorism and attacking Western assets in the region as well. So we must connect the dots, look at Iran's behavior and deal with them, and maybe perhaps evolve our foreign policy to really fit their behavior right now.
Now, speaking of Iran, the Iranian government says it will take a reciprocal approach, Lisa, after the European Parliament voted to blacklist the Islamic Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist group. So now Iranian officials say, hey, you're going to do that to us, we're going to do the same thing to you, and declare the armies of the European states as terrorist groups should the EU endorse the resolution against the IRGC.
This is, talk about just flexing their muscles once again. I guess the Europeans must be shaking in their boots, where the Iran regime is now threatening them back as a tit-for-tat measure. Obviously, the Europeans are very slow on this, and so is the United States, to be very frank, about really standing up to the threat of the Iran regime. So they've been playing out the clock during the Biden administration. Under Trump, obviously, there was a very different policy, very harsh policy with regards to Iran. He pulled out of the JCPOA in May of 2018. He put very targeted sanctions on the proper sectors of the regime that would apply to their banking, their oil, and again, hitting them where it hurts, so to speak. And then you had the Biden administration that came into office saying, we want to be nice to you guys. We want to normalize relations with you guys, and you are off the hook. And with that kind of messaging, Tehran has been playing out the clock, and they've been doing whatever they want to. And now, as the people are flooding the streets and protesting, well, they've got to kind of see what they can do to keep in power. And that's exactly what they're doing, to continue flexing their muscles. And the Europeans, again, coming to this very late to finally decide to put the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, which is the paramilitary arm of Iran's regime, on the terror list. I mean, what took them so long? They're obviously terrorists, right? Well, the Iranians hit back and said, if you're going to put us on a list, we'll put you on a list. So there you have it.
There's some big news coming out of North Korea. That country is facing the worst food shortage since the 1990s. Lisa, what's causing the crisis outside of inflation?
Right, it's awful, and it's actually has to do more with their wheat industry, and it's also a lack of care with the government. They're putting their money and their assets into cyber technology, into missiles. If you recall, weekly we've been seeing during the last 2 years missile tests, flexing of the muscles, really beefing up their military assets to a point where they can play with the big leagues. And then at the same time, you see where the people are suffering. We don't have that much information about North Korea. We rely on their own media and their own inside sources to get information to us, but it is completely blacked out. But when we do get information like this, it is in fact telling us that this famine is the worst they've had in 30 years, and people are really struggling.
Lisa, the U.S. federal election is just around the corner now. What is it, next year, is it not?
2024.
2024. So is Donald Trump actually putting his name forward as the Republican nominee, the Republican candidate? And if so, do you think he'll have any competition?
Well, it looks like there are a few candidates that are thinking about putting their name in the ring. And I know, in fact, he will have plenty of competition, perhaps by the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. And now we are hearing maybe Nikki Haley would like to put her name on that list, and perhaps former Vice President Mike Pence would like to put his name on that list, and perhaps Secretary of State under Trump, Mike Pompeo would put his name on the list. But this is all speculation. We do not know yet. But these are the rumors that are floating around. Trump obviously wants a go at this, but we hope, everyone hopes that this is not as ugly as it could get between the Republican candidates, that they could work something out, perhaps support each other, form some sort of coalition to go forward to be able to have some sort of victory in 2024.
A lot of times when I chat with federal, provincial parties, they're always looking for a star candidate to put the name forward, right? It doesn't get much bigger when it comes to a star candidate than Donald Trump. So Trump maybe against DeSantis, how would you think that would actually play out?
What would be unfortunate would be for the two of them to go at it and then to just allow the Democrats to have an easy win. And I say that because, we're very divided in this country. That's no secret, right? As you guys are watching down, I think it's like, grab the popcorn, here they go. It's been extremely volatile. And, the Republicans, it was theirs to lose, and they lost it in the midterms. And, we had some wins for the Republicans. We had some wins for the Democrats, but it was not what people expected. And because of that, going into 2024, the Republicans are looking and really self-assessing the party and saying, what needs to be done in order to get not just our 50% of the vote, but to get some independent and centralist voters to come along and believe in the Republican candidate. Donald Trump obviously did a lot of good for this country, but he's a very polarizing name right now. Ron DeSantis is doing incredible things in Florida. He has a lot of support there. And of course, someone like a Nikki Haley would be much more soft-spoken, but very strong, a woman candidate. She's of Indian descent, so she's brown, so to speak, if that matters to people in terms of voting for a minority candidate. And the others also have a great amount of experience, Pence, Pompeo. So we'll have to see, who emerges as that person who can win, not just be the best Republican candidate, but who can win the country and get that 51% of the vote or more.
Lisa, here in Canada, we have a number of federal parties, and a lot of federal parties actually do quite well. At the top three, of course, being the Conservative Party of Canada, the Liberal Party, the Justin Trudeau Liberals governing party, and the NDP. How come there's no actual third party as a choice for American voters? Republican, Democrats, two-party system. There aren't a lot of options available.
Yeah, the only time third party has come in has divided the vote and has given the vote over to one party over the other, and that makes perfect sense, right? Because you're going to have candidates, and it's such a long time where this system, the same establishment that Donald Trump worked hard to kind of, dissolve, that's been the working political system in this country. And in order to defeat that, we would need at least four political parties to come up in order to kind of balance out the two parties and then see which party would really emerge as the third strongest party. And I say that only because we don't need a tiebreaker. We actually need a legitimate third party to come in and to stand for something different, which the American people would want. Right now, that's looking like it might be the Republicans who need a second party, because there are so many that are kind of disassociating with the establishment. And we saw that with the Speaker McCarthy's vote after vote after vote. I mean, the Trump Republicans were sending a clear message to the establishment Republicans saying, you know, we want something different going forward, and maybe that'll be that. And on the Democrat side, we're seeing a lot of people trying to disassociate from the leftists, like the AOCs and the Ilhan Omars. And I know Nancy Pelosi had to kind of play that balancing act. Chuck Schumer is playing that balancing act because they want to evolve with the party, but at the same time, those are not their values. I mean, they can say that it is, but those are not their values. So, you know, there's been a major shift to the left, you know, and because of that, we might see something emerge there. But until we see that, how we have these two parties going at it, and again, grab the popcorn in Canada, because I think you're going to be in for a good show come the 2024 election.
Looking forward to it. Political reporter and foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.